Hey everybody, it's so nice to see you here. My name is Melissa Chapman and I am a collaborator on all things Beeler.Tech. One of the things we do on Beeler.Tech is we've created this library of videos to help publishers really save time or move things forward. Some of those videos are product demos and some of them are conversations. And today we're recording one of our conversations. So we're joined by Andrew Fowler, the Director of Advertising Operations with Assembly, and he's going to talk us through an exercise that his organization went through recently. So Andrew, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Can you, before we get into kind of the project that Assembly took on, would you mind talking to us a little bit, kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your background and a little bit about Assembly for those of us who may not know.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Andrew Fowler. I'm the Director of Advertising Operations at Assembly. I like to say that Assembly is a tech company masquerading as a digital publisher. We have a very big software development team. So Assembly got started in 2015. We had one website and four people. It was the two co-founders, one designer, and a single software developer, which was myself. And we've grown throughout the years, and I think we won fastest growing company in British Columbia in 2020. And now we have 6 owned and operated websites. And throughout the course, my role has been that of a software developer. And then over the last year, I've been in a leadership role as the director of advertising operations. And I have a background mostly in software development and computer science.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm meeting more people that have an engineering background that are I've always thought of as kind of adjacent to ad operations. I think you're the first person I've ever talked to who has a very specific background and now is running an ad operations team. So I think that gives you kind of a unique view because many people kind of end up in ad operations from a variety of different aspects, but not usually engineering.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of fell into it like a lot of people, but I think ad operations is a lot more attractive to software developers these days since the advent of pre-bid. Developers really
Yeah,
like to build and create things, and that's a lot more possible now that, pre-bid is open source and you can get your hands on the data from pre-bid auctions. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more software developers getting involved in ad ops.
I think you're right. All right, let's jump into it. So you guys have a very, what I would call an analytical way of evaluating vendors. Um, could you give us an overview of the strategy that Assembly uses when you think about, bringing a source or a vendor on board and how you might evaluate picking the right vendor?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it was the tech investor Andrew Horowitz who coined the phrase "software is eating the world," and I think it's true. But I think it's missed, a little slice maybe in digital publishing. It seems uncommon for digital publishers to be heavily staffed with tech people, and so Assembly is unique in that way. And so we've gone about building our publishing business from a tech company perspective. And so we built our own internal analytics, and we use that to inform all of our business decisions, including vendor selection.
That's awesome. Um, I think you guys actually won an award for this.
Yeah,
Yeah?
back in 2019, we won a Digiday Award for the best use of audience insights. And that was for our internal analytics platform. We call it Statera, and
Statera.
it informs all of our business decisions.
Got it. You guys also do something, and maybe it's part of the analytics program, the split testing code. Is that
Yeah, yeah. So on top of our internal analytics, we've written our own multivariate testing software suite. We're basically, well, in the case of vendor selection, and in this case, ad quality vendor, we're able to segment our users into different buckets and compare the performance of different vendors that way.
that's awesome. So when you're doing that exercise, So, and we'll talk more about the ad quality selection that you went through, but in general, like, what are you guys looking for from from measurement and success? Like,
Yeah,
is there a general bucket, or is it specific to each vendor and what they're looking at?
there is a general bucket, but depending on certain vendors, it depends. Like if we're trying to add a new advertiser into our programmatic advertising stack, then there's certain things we're looking for as opposed to an ad quality vendor. But sort of as a general bucket, web core vitals are huge for us. LCP, FID, and CLS, kind of the big things that we're looking for. And because we've built our own internal analytics, we can take those core web vitals and inject them into our own analytics using the Google Page Speed Insights API. And so, really, one of the main advantages of owning your own data is you can add whatever you want into it. And so we can enrich our user data with Google Page Speed Insights if we want to. And so that plays into our decision making process.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? You said something there that I like, but I want to make sure when you say own your own data. So own your own data as it's in the house. Are you talking about first party data? Are you talking about being smart about the in making decisions? Just whatever
Yeah,
that means for you.
yeah, I mean, all of those things really. What I mean specifically by own your own data is there should be a database that you own, that you can change, and that you can query at any time you want that has your data in it. I think when it comes to relying on third party vendors for your own data, they never really give you access to the actual database. And that's the important part because every business is unique. It's as unique as the people that work within that business. And the chance that you're going to find some data vendor who, has the right dashboards for all the metrics and business decisioning that you need to make is unlikely. It really pays to own your own data and be able to do what you want with it.
And so, does that mean that you're a proponent for everybody having like a data lake, right, and having everything,
Yeah,
for lack of a
your own data warehouse. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of digital publishers could benefit from hiring a few more software developers and building out their own data warehouse. Absolutely.
got it? And then can you talk to us a little bit about, like, do you have an analytics team that sits on top and works with the tool that you have? Is it really accessible to everybody via dashboards? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I won't dive too far into the
Fair.
technical details, but we've done our own implementation of an open source database called ClickHouse. I think it was originally created by Yandex, which is like the Russian Google.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not
Anyways,
familiar.
very high performance real time SQL database. And so it allows us to run queries and get site metrics like impressions per session, time on page, that kind of thing, down to the minute. And so on the back end, we have this database that stores all of our data. And then our technical team has created a front end as well for graphing and analyzing this data. Think Google Analytics, but it's our own version that is specific to digital publishing and our version of digital publishing.
Got it. That's super interesting. It's not often that I talk to a publisher that has the ability to build something like that from the ground up, especially if they're not a huge publisher. So it's exciting and different what you guys have done.
It does seem rare. And then speaking of our size and team structure, we have a technical team led by our very talented director of technology named Aaron Sundberg, and they led the charge of building out Statera. And then there's the ops team, which is myself and 5 other people, and we cross collaborate heavily. When I say the ops team, everybody on the ops team writes code here in some capacity. So it really is very heavy on software development, like I've said before. And so we are contributing to Statera. One of my team members, Brian Ty, is the one who wrote all of our split testing software that ties into Statera in our internal analytics. So it's very collaborative and very software heavy.
So your team is actually writing code that isn't just code to get ads to run on the site, but actually to support your ad business.
Yeah. Yep.
Super interesting. That's
Yep.
awesome.
Thanks. Thank you.
So let's jump in a little bit and talk about you did a recent evaluation, right, with some ad quality vendors.
Yes.
Um, I feel like what you guys have built would make, I mean, I guess that sort of evaluation or any sort of evaluation a lot easier, right? Because you've got that at your fingertips. But can you talk to us a little bit about why you undertook that evaluation? Were you looking for a new provider? Did you need something you didn't have? Like, just what brought it up?
Absolutely. To be perfectly transparent, our contract with GeoEdge was coming to an end, and we used that as an opportunity to explore other vendors. And I think, we haven't always had Statera, and it has gone through an evolution of, being more and more and more polished. And we're at the point where we could properly evaluate our ad quality vendors. And so we wanted to give that a shot.
Very nice. So coming up with GeoEdge, how did you, and we're not going to get into names here, but how did you decide the other
Hmm.
vendors that you wanted to evaluate? And this gets less into the tools that you use, but more when I'm thinking about the publishers that are watching this video to say, how do you make the decision, right? There's a lot of players out there. Like, how do you
Mhm.
decide who's going to become part of the test? Or at least, how did you guys make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to ask on Beeler.Tech for recommendations. That's always nice.
Yeah.
But we had a list of features that we wanted that we started out with. We wanted good creative review and blocking controls. I don't know if you've ever used Google Ad Manager's creative review, but it's pretty, yeah, not great. And we wanted landing page scanning and category blocking, and basically this list of features we were able to narrow down. Uh, all the companies that are going to be in our test to three.
Got it. So then what happens? Like, how long is the test? How do you, without getting into too much of the nuts and bolts about, how you put it together, right, from a technology perspective, but how do you actually implement it within assembly?
Yeah, and ad quality vendors is a little bit challenging to test, but the way we set it up is we created a multivariate test with three different vendors, and one third of our mobile US traffic gets one vendor, another third gets another one, another third gets the other one, and then we had a few metrics that we were measuring them on. We can see, which how each vendor interacts and impacts core web vitals, how they impact ad load speed, and in turn ad viewability. And yeah, we measured them all against each other. So those tangible numerical metrics are much easier to measure. But there's a few other ones that are more challenging when it comes to ad quality vendors. One of them being number of ads blocked, like who is the best at blocking ads, and that's a tough one. One, because the settings for all the ad quality vendors are a little bit different in their
Mm-hmm.
dashboards. Um, in order to have a fair test, we tried to keep all the settings the same across all three. But I must admit that isn't, it's not perfect. We can't have it exactly the same, but I think we got it pretty close. Uh, and so, yeah, throughout this evaluation, it turned out GeoEdge had, the most number of ads blocked. They had the lowest impact on ad load speed. In fact, I think they're about an 8% improvement in ad load speed to, the next closest vendor.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And then when it comes to core web vitals, anytime you're adding more code and JavaScript to your page, things get heavier, things get slower. I mean, sites are super fast with no ads, but we do need to have some of those. So yeah, I mean, everybody was pretty comparable, I will say, in terms of impact on core web vitals and script size and impact on the page. But yeah, I think the real one of the big turning points and the real thing that swayed us towards GeoEdge was the ad load speed.
How long? Um, well, and in that's the one you just said that was 8% better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How long did you run the test for?
We like to run our tests for I don't know, anywhere between 2 weeks and a month. This particular test took about a month. The nice thing about our internal analytics is it has built-in statistical significance. So we know when we have enough data to be statistically
That's awesome.
significant. Yeah, it takes a lot of thinking out of it. Like I'm not sitting there calculating p-values and statistical significance. Our internal analytics just tells me, which
Yeah,
is cool.
that's yeah, like yeah, I never had that when I was on the operations side of publishers, so that's good, right? Because we would ask that question about how much is enough, right? And some of those, right, you want to set ahead of time, but if you've got a tool that you've built that can help you know that, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so you ran this test, took about a month, results came out good, tested everything you could, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I'm always a um, big believer in having partners over vendors, right? Partnerships are important. They have some give and take. People might have feedback for me from the partner side of things. Can you talk to me a little bit about Assembly's take on that? Like, how do you weigh the idea of your relationship with the vendor against what they can technically do? Like, how do you mix
Right.
those together to make a decision?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about engineers and software development and being heavy and maybe cold and calculating. And I mean, yeah, it's not like we're a group of computers at Assembly working with a group of computers at GeoEdge. No, we're people working with other people. And that certainly plays into the decision. And when it came down to it, and we said, hey, GeoEdge, we are evaluating other vendors. They all hopped on a call with me and we had a very open and honest discussion, and it was really refreshing. They were, not very pushy or salesy. They said, great, let's test it. Let's go. And yeah, it was a great experience. Our rep there, Yael is fantastic. Shout out to her. And yeah, it's been a great experience from a human perspective as well, not just a cold calculating computer perspective.
Well, and that sounds like such a win because you already had the numbers to say the performance is better and then you like them in general. So that's good.
Yeah,
Um,
and in terms of their responsiveness as well, any problems that come up, they're so responsive that's just it's been great. What can I say?
that's awesome. Um, Anything else you want to share? I feel like we've covered a lot around the test and kind of how you guys go about things. Is there anything else I missed there before I kind of pivot a little bit?
No, I think you covered yeah, how we conducted the test and our approach to data and software focused digital publishing. So yeah, feel free to pivot.
All right. So you said something when we had chatted before about, sometimes it can be hard without the measurement to really make sure that you get the right vendor in place. And you guys have built some really cool tools to be able to do this. But so I'm thinking with my hat on of other publishers on the call or other publishers listening to this video of if they don't have the internal resources you guys do, um, how might they be able to think about it and go into assessments and still make good decisions and end up with the right vendor, even if they don't have a team of engineers behind them, right, to run all the or to build things for them. So, do you have any thoughts on that you could share with the group?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to information, I think the precedent has been set by the big companies like Google and Facebook to be not exactly forthcoming with information, right? And I think communities like Beeler.Tech are changing that. We have publishers collaborating with each other and sharing information and building a community. That's a great way to get started. If anybody wants to have a chat with me about some hard data numbers, by all means do reach out. I'd be happy to dig into real numbers and tests. We've tested all kinds of vendors, from new SSPs to flooring providers, and I have strong opinions about all of them. So please, let's
Bring
have a
it
chat.
on. Bring it
Yeah, let's have
on.
a chat. But yeah, when it comes to building your own data warehouse, it isn't a small task like what we've accomplished. by implementing our own ClickHouse database requires a talented and sizable engineering team. And I think you can achieve something similar by maybe having just a few good senior software developers and using something like Google BigQuery, which is kind of like a data warehouse as a service,
Hmm.
and just sort of shooting your data into there and then having those software developers run queries on it. I think you can get a lot of mileage out of that without building a huge, robust analytics system.
Well, and I feel like what's been underlying everything that you've talked about here, I mean, outside of the technology, but you have the technology, but you're using it to measure and you are ahead of time making the decision about what is acceptable, right? And I don't think we talked as much about that here, but I think that's really important for other publishers to think about is like, okay, what's important to us, right? Um, how can we measure that so that we can then go into a test and make decisions and measure and figure out like yay or nay, did this hit our threshold or not hit our threshold, or at least a mark. So even if you don't have the tool to tell you, if you've hit the statistically significant amount, right, you certainly could run the test a little bit longer. But if you know what you're trying to measure, I think that sometimes we get into like a great sales call and there's an exciting new tool and we get kind of lost in the shiny penny of something and not really remember that we have requirements around stuff, right? Whether that's ad quality or another kind of vendor. And once we had defined those requirements, then we can measure against them.
Yeah, I mean the scientific method, it works great.
You guys are pros at it, right? So all right.
I think a lot of vendors or a lot of publishers get stuck in this trap of cycling through vendors, or they maybe switch from one vendor to the next, and maybe it's because of pricing or a better sales pitch, but they end up kind of on this treadmill going around and around and around, trying out different vendors and not knowing if they're improving or degrading, or it's just this trap. And so, and we've been there, and so part of our reason for building this is to just inform our decisions with data.
Yeah, I think that's super smart. And I think it's a great model to follow, or at least to strive for, right? Um, okay. Well, I want to thank you so much, Andrew, for taking the time today and sharing your experience and expertise with us. And you guys heard it. Andrew's wide open and happy to share his opinions on things. I always say I have lots of opinions. Just ask me about them. Happy to share them. Sounds like you and I are in that same boat. So
Yeah.
thanks again. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Take care.